Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest episode of Behind the Curtain with the Sound on Stage. I'm Greg Heilman, and today I'm joined by a returning guest, Beau Prichard, who is the playwright of Ted and Gary. We spoke with him previously in an episode of Between the Pages to get his perspective as a playwright on this show, which is actually now we're ready to open it. So it's opening on Friday, October 3rd at the Julles Maes Saloon in Georgetown, and I'm joined by Beau and also one of the stars of the show, Seamus C. Smith, who is Gary Ridgway in the play. So, first of all, welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
So I'm glad I've got a chance to talk to you both. This is such, I mean, I've been intrigued by this story, Beau, since you and I talked before, and I'm glad it's finally coming to the stage. It's funny how time flies. Must have flown for you since then,
Oh
because
boy,
as you,
yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. So we talked before about the perspective of the playwright and talking a little bit about your work in trying to get it ready for the stage. But now that you've got it and you're in the process, how has that been? Has the story changed at all since you started putting it with actually actors and sets and things like that?
Well, I will say that the original script when I sat down to wrote it was actually going to be, I don't want to say neutral because it's very still pointed because it's about serial killers, but initially I sat down to write a standard like proscenium production, and somewhere along the line that evolved into wanting the intimacy of an immersive production. So, like, if you look at the script, there's nothing in it still that indicates that it has to be an immersive production. So I kept it neutral, um, in case someone else like wants to do it. But very, very early on, especially when we were looking at venues, we knew it would be easier to have a real bar to feel like you're in a real location than try to build a bar, or rent the facilities to make a bar. So once we knew we were going to be at a place like the Julles Maes, um, a lot of things fell into place, and that dictated a lot of decisions that in the script could go one way or another. There was really only one way to do them in the space we have. We only have the one back room, and the script is actually in two locations. There's a bar and a diner. So we're just doing that with a little bit of set decoration and lighting. It's still going to be in the same room. They just changed tables and it feels like a different place. Um, the script changes little bits from actor input and how things sound once you see them done a couple of times. But maybe 100 words have been changed since I like first printed it for the actors back in March, and that's things that grew out of rehearsals, I think. And that's all things that were a little bit flexible or that sounded better or that I liked how the actor did it more. It has not changed like the story at all or how the script works or what the conclusion is. We worked out something for how the show will end only a couple of weeks ago, which is not in the script, which is not a big change, but I'm going to say that it is not, it's going to change the impact of how the show ends a little bit. And we can probably circle back to that since it's about the end.
Sure.
Um, but Seamus has been on board for more than a year. When we were working together on Red at Burien back in March of last year, I started talking to him about this. And so he's the first person that's been on board for the show the whole time. As soon as I knew that I was going to be putting it on, as soon as I had a producer who was willing to move the show forward, I was talking to him because I felt strongly that I thought that he would be able to perform either of those roles because the script, as written, as I told you a little bit earlier, the intent is both of these guys are about the same age because in 1974, I want to say Gary was 23 and Ted was like 25. Um, and so I was looking for two youngish men to play these two people, and it did not work out that way for a couple of reasons that we'll get back to. But Seamus was essentially on board from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, Seamus, while we're on the topic, when I first saw that you were part of this, for some reason my mind went to you would be Ted Bundy. And maybe it's because you're a nice guy. Um, and Ted Bundy always came across to everyone he he met as a really nice guy. And so I was kind of paralleling the two of those. But then I saw you're playing Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. It surprised me a little bit. But to Beau's point, where you kind of had the choice to play either, I'd like to get your perspective on what on playing Gary Ridgway and how you've kind of done the research to learn more about him.
Yeah. Well, great is Beau allowed me to explore, as you said, both characters. So I think I started with Gary, and we were, we'd meet at like a Seattle Public Library, and we would just work and play with the script, and then he would let me play with Ted and work that a little bit. And as he was talking about, a lot of it came to casting, but when I reflect back on it, I'm actually incredibly thankful to be playing Gary Ridgway. So it's funny that you brought up, Greg, that you thought I'd be Ted, because that is where I, as actor, live in comfort. Is that that's something I knew I could do well in terms of
Being
just what I've done before.
being charming.
Right. Yeah, that I'm not gonna say it. That's
No, no,
but
absolutely.
the experience of it, right? And some of the roles that I've played. And Gary was intimidating to me. I had a wonderful discussion with Beau where I was like, I don't see myself being convincing enough in this and living in that physicality. And he worked really, really well with me because of our time with Red
Mhm.
to push me in the right way, give me some great resources leading into it. Um, and then all of a sudden, just like that, it was go time. There are some moments which you'll see in the play that are recorded, and it's Gary, essentially, you could call it in present day in prison, reflecting on this experience he had with Ted. And so those take place in the quote unquote future. And so we filmed those ahead of time.
Right.
So
Almost 3 months
in
ago now.
yeah, so in June, I was already having the to work out the physicality, the language, who I wanted Gary to be before we even got into the in-depth rehearsals. Which was really fun because we also had some brilliant people helping film that and put some age makeup on me, and we had a lot of fun with it. But so my work definitely, like, I had to kickstart it a little bit earlier. And with that, I just started watching interviews and watching how he held himself, how he speaks, looking at pictures, finding ways that I could match some of the weird faces that he makes. You'll see a lot of pictures of him. He's just got these funky eyebrows that when I end up trying to replicate or play with, that really ground me in the character and really just kind of change everything about me. Um, and so now in the end, now I'm just having a blast because it's been that perfect mold of, I know I can do it. I trust Beau. I trust the script, but it is going to be a bit of a challenge. Um, and yeah, here we are.
And
Uh,
just go ahead, Bo.
oh, I was going to say inadvertently something that I didn't actually write into the script, but that came out through readings is an element of like class warfare between the two of these guys because Gary, excuse me, Gary is committedly blue collar and Ted is a social climber.
Mm.
And we wound up with Seamus. One of the reasons that Seamus talked about playing Ted is he's like, well, I can identify with more societal parallels with him and me, so it would be easier or more comfortable for me to step into this person that I understand some more things about. And then ironically, it wound up being the opposite that we have Seamus playing Gary, and then Ryan Higgins, who's playing Ted, now makes a living as a carpenter. So he is in that blue collar demographic, and he is specifically playing against that type as well as playing Ted as this person who does not want to be from that demographic.
I have to assume, and I love to hear that because I love to see actors stepping out of their comfort zone. It has to make it. I mean, you said you were having fun with it, Seamus. I mean, I think that part must be the challenge of it must keep it interesting for you.
Yeah, it definitely does. Well, and honestly, one of the biggest challenges, and this is something we literally just talked about at one of our rehearsals this week, is the starting point in terms of knowledge of these people. These are real people, but a lot of people know who Ted Bundy was. Not a lot of people know Gary Ridgway. A lot of people that grew up here know who he is, but they might not even know what he looks like necessarily.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know,
Yeah.
so I was coming at so the kind of that final challenge was coming at it with like a blank slate, which is almost harder to do than playing within those safety nets. But then at the same time, now that opened up the discussions of, well, we can create and build this character, and the audience is going to trust us a little bit easier. I don't. Luckily for me, I don't have the pressure of like Ted Bundy, that big name that people know. A lot of people are like Ted and Gary. Now, who's I put together Ted? Now, who's Gary? Right?
Yeah. Because a lot of
Um,
people still don't even know his name. I mean, the Green River
Well,
Killer,
right.
right? Yeah.
we talked about that last time, that people know who the Green River Killer is, and abstractly they know that Gary Ridgway is a serial murderer, but they don't necessarily know that it's the same person because he was arrested like 15 years after he stopped killing people. So the media gap is, and when they did arrest him at first, they kept it really quiet because they were interviewing him and trying to close cases.
Hmm.
It's actually really hard to find his official 20th end of the 20th century mugshot. If you look it up, the first shot that comes up is when he got arrested for pandering in the 70s. Um, and then they closed all those cases and he vanished into prison for the better part of 20 years. So he was never a celebrity and his name was never associated in the headlines the way Ted's ever was.
Yeah. I mean, Ted, I mean, I think the first document, I don't know, I guess it was a documentary or some biopic miniseries. I think Mark Harmon played,
Yeah, they did. That might have been like as early as 1980, but yeah, they got
yeah.
that out quick.
Yeah, yeah. And then since that, I mean, it's like, I guess, I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer's got the same thing right now where it's like
Yes.
multiple shows about him that people are learning about him. But yeah, Gary was just kind of mired in kind of obscurity there for a while.
Seamus mentioned something that I wanted to talk about regarding directing in particular. Is one of the conversations that we had. Is we had a test reading a year ago. We did a table read with a different actor playing Ted, and he was maybe a head taller than Seamus. And there's a line where Gary threatens Ted, and Seamus said, "If I'm looking at a guy this size across the table from me, I don't know how a person like me feels comfortable threatening someone without it seeming silly or like a punchline or cartoonish." Do you remember that, Seamus?
Oh yeah.
And how did we get through that?
Well, now I have no problem threatening a guy like Ryan. No, I'm just kidding.
Ryan took care of that on his own.
Yeah. No, but we worked on it's the what if.
Mhm.
Gary has a military background and he's got training, and it's there are ways you can say things and hold yourself that even if you are possibly a smaller person, that you really do come across as a threat because of what you could do. And I know that we explored that a little bit as well, and so far it's paid off, I think. Others will get to be the judge of that.
There's a part of what Seamus was talking about earlier about discovering Gary is in his shoulders and in his face and in his mouth. When we were doing that filming, Seamus really found like a key or a button or a shift where he can drop in and out, and you can see him going from being Seamus to being Gary, and his voice changes and his posture changes. And I think because of that conversation, at least a little bit, there is a solidity to him that Seamus doesn't have, that is a little bit uh maybe pushing for a fight or naturally aggressive or taking up, and we talk about this a lot, the way that a person takes up space is Gary's wife described him as being one of the biggest men she'd ever met, and he's like 5'9", like that is on paper. So he was not a big dude. So we talked about how he must have taken up space and gotten close to her and did things socially in space with her to make her feel like he was much bigger than he was.
Yeah. I was so last year I interviewed Jeremy Kent Jackson, who is an acting coach here in Gig Harbor. And I introduced when I introduced him at our awards last week, I mentioned that nobody plays a despicable character to me as well as he does. And when I asked him about that, he said it's all about allowing yourself permission to act in a certain way. That we all have these different parts of us inside that, socially we don't give ourselves permission generally to act this way, but as an actor, you have the ability to do that. Did you find yourself with doing that, Seamus? Looking at yourself and saying, "All right, it's okay to be like this when I'm not normally, this kind of personality."
Yeah, I was able to develop that. I'm incredibly thankful because the a lot of the acting training and ensemble training that I had at Central Washington University, we talked a lot about grounding in and grounding out as a character. Really working to separate yourself, go in, be that person, leave that person there, and go enjoy life, right? And so I kind of was a bit ahead in that game of, like I already knew, okay, we're gonna separate these two people. And what that allowed me to do is when I'm in space, I feel completely comfortable going going there, right? Saying some of these things, and being present in that. Because I've allowed myself to, and I know that Ryan's done the same thing. Um, and and what has been really great about the whole thing has been Ryan Higgins, who again is playing Ted Bundy, because we both say things that, when I mean it's not a film, but essentially when Bo says cut, we're like, ugh, like, okay, all right. But it's that mutual understanding that him and I have that allows us to trust one another and work and develop that. But that's something that made me intrigued about this process when Bo gave me the script, is that it doesn't shy away from anything. You don't see anything, like it's not graphic, it's all in that language and those tones. And but that is it, because it doesn't shy away from it. This was another thing we talked about at rehearsal. Like if we didn't put everything into it, it would feel silly, or it would feel like we're making fun of something that, we're definitely not trying to do, because these are two real life monsters, if you will, right? And so you don't want to idolize them or make anything goofy. And so allowing ourselves to just get in there and you know fight with the script, against the script, and go for it has really, I think, aided the process.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, Bo, Seamus was talking about the fact that you and I talked about this when we spoke before, about the fact that yes, nothing is shown, but it's in the dialogue and the relationships and things like that. From a directorial perspective, um, what have you been able to do to amplify that from beyond just the script and the dialogue and some of the implied things to bring the audience into this world?
I don't remember if we talked about this the last time or not, but I have been really aware of the fact that, like, if I were to hand the script to someone else to direct, I would have to include like 30 pages of notes that explore the subtext that, like, I knew when I was writing it, so I didn't have to put it in the script because I knew I would be able to explain it to the actors. Um, there are a couple of lines that really specifically evoke and refer to Gary's having been in the Navy and having served. There are lines that on the page are not at all combative, that we make a challenge of wills between the two guys, that everyone in the audience will all of a sudden know that they're not talking about what they're talking about. They're talking about territoriality, or they're talking about uh, giving the other person permission to be a little bit more explicit about what we all know they're talking about, but because they're ostensibly in public, they're never using the words like murder or
Mm-hmm.
kill. Uh, so finding there's a line in particular in the second scene. In the first scene, they use the word act as a euphemism for being violent against someone, not necessarily murder, but to have committed a violent act. And in the second scene, Ted uses that word again, but some time has passed between their conversations, and Gary is a little bit dense. So the first time Ted uses the word act again, he's not just saying it as a euphemism, he's also using it as a reminder to Gary of the code that they kind of invented to safely talk about this in public. And so, like, that's not in the script, but that's a very specific subtext to kind of like have a wink or a suggestion to it between the actors. Um, there's one place in particular that calls for Ted says Gary can never come back to the bar where they meet again because two people like them can't be in the same place at the same time. It's just inherently suspicious. Or something will get tracked back to one of them and then it'll be tracked back to both of them. And so Ted says, so you can never come here again because I was here first. And they have a battle of wills where neither of them says anything, but they're both sitting at the table saying, kind of fuck you, I want to stay here. And I knew they were going to do that because I wrote it in the script, but how that was going to shake out with those particular actors or how they chose to do it. Um, Ryan is incredibly still. He says, "This is my place. You can't come here again." And stays still while Seamus, very small movements. None of this is broad. They're just sitting at a table. So it's very like cinematic style acting. It's not very big because we know everyone's going to be able to see really easily. But Seamus goes through like a series of postures that says, aggression, I want to stay here, I'm trying to argue with you, and eventually they reach a settlement, and then they just keep going on the conversation that they were having. And it is that kind of beat with different actors and a different director, and exactly the same script could be played a dozen different ways. But this is the way that it shook out with this version of Ted and Gary, and I think that's one of the my script or not, I think that's one of the really interesting things about directing is finding the flexibility and the many different ways you could get from point A to point B.
Yeah, Seamus, talk to me about that. Maybe that scene in particular. I remember in one play I was in one time when I had a scene that was I was across the table from someone at dinner, and I had one line that depended on how I said it. Changed the mood of the whole thing. And I feel like I got it right once. And um, what was that like for you to get the right motion and the right expressions in that particular scene?
Um, to find the right thing. um, I think it goes back to the idea of you just can't be afraid to quote unquote do it right every single time, and allow yourself to be present in the scene, and it will just naturally happen. I'm not gonna lie, part of the reason that I have found success with a lot of moments in this show dates back to our work together on Red, because you know the last time I worked with Beau was another two-hander
Hmm.
with someone like Scott C. Brown, who will challenge you in every
Mm.
scene that you're in, and in the best ways possible. And um and so learning to be present in moments like that with that specific actor and in that context of the show, now in this one doesn't feel as daunting, and so um for me, it's again trusting the script that has got us to that point. It's now an earned moment. Ryan does an incredible job of bringing something a little different to every moment we have together, each time we run it through. And I think that that would drive certain directors crazy, but Beau relishes in it. And so do I, because it's not different in terms of like messing anything up or
Yeah.
changing blocking or anything like that. It's just, I keep using this word present, but it's Ryan's version of being present and how different things land on him in that moment. And that, of course, naturally then changes what I do. And so we just have this wonderful back and forth. Um, and then it ends up working out really well. And all of a sudden we're passed through the moment and I'm not worried about how it looks or if it's right. It just feels good.
I want to mention something about that when you both talked about doing something right. And I totally know what you're talking about. And I think it's important to make the distinction that in rehearsals for me and in theater at large, I try not to think of there as being like a right way of doing something. So, what Seamus is talking about, I worked with an actor on a film set, and he would do something and we would love it and we'd be like, great, we need another take for safety, do the exact same thing again. And he was incapable of doing the exact same thing again. And the flexibility that Seamus is talking about is Ryan will do something a little bit differently, but it will make you feel the same way, or it will generate the same response, or it's coming from the same place. So it lands the same way, even if he's still experimenting with things. So it means the actors are always a little bit more engaged than if they're doing literally the exact same thing over and over again. And it's dangerous to get stuck in those rhythms and repeat them because then you do stop discovering things and you might get bored. Uh, and so it is a needle to thread because Seamus is right. There are circumstances where I really liked the way you did that means please keep doing that. And some actors will keep experimenting and getting further away from the intent or like what we're looking for. And both of these actors have found a middle ground where they're like, great, I know how to provoke my teammate or my opponent in that way. So now I'm going to explore like the vocabulary inside that moment of possibly being even more provocative, or what happens if I don't push quite as hard. And it's easier when there's just two people to explore all the different aspects of that, like back and forth and up and down. And I think that's one of the reasons that I really resonate with two-handers in general. Like one of the first plays that I directed was The Dumbwaiter, and it was by intent another two-person show. Is that just the multiplicity of just that simple dynamic between two people is always fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you before I let you guys go about you talked a little bit about the end before, and I'd be lying if I said that when you said an impactful ending, I didn't think about the fact that we have two serial killers on stage and we have an impactful ending. Um, Maybe the audience doesn't get away alive. I don't know, but there's no splash zone in this, which is nice because, like you said, there's
That is correct.
nothing shown. Um,
No.
but how do you wrap up a story without maybe giving it away?
Sure. So there's two aspects to that. One of which is before the table read we did a year ago with Seamus, we did another table read maybe 6 months before that with two different actors, and it had an entirely different ending. I don't know that any of the people involved in the show have seen it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm happy to share it with the actors. I just keep forgetting to bring it up. So the play essentially has a three-act structure, but it has a fourth really short act that's like a coda or an epilogue. And it is just a little over a page now, and the original version of it was like 4 or 5 pages, and it was because I was trying to tie up endings and make it, if not pat, then explain that as soon as the play is over, uh, Ted leaves town. Like historically, that's actually what happened. This is set in the very specific window when both Ted and Gary lived in Seattle, which was only a few months in 1974, and Ted essentially left before they were going to arrest him. Like people were starting to figure out who he was. And so I packed a lot more of that into the ending than was necessary, I think. So we have a much more stripped down version of that now. And what happens is Gary calls the hotline for identifying Ted and says, hey, that guy whose drawing is in the newspaper, I know him. He hangs out at this bar and I think he's killed people. Uh, and I won't spoil it any more than that, but we found a way to make that moment be about the consequences of these two being the monsters that they are rather than being about the monsters.
Hmm.
And that we only figured out like 2 weeks ago. It is
Something like that. Yeah.
it's not in the script. I just at one rehearsal, I was like, it crossed my mind that we could do this. How do we feel about that? And the actors and the producer were all on board with it, and it included adding a multimedia element that we'd already shot the film stuff for Gary using Seamus dressed in prison orange. So we're already using a multimedia element in the show, so it was not hard to add another one that kind of acknowledges how these two fit into a much larger story of violence in history in Seattle. And I think it was important to put them in a larger context rather than having the show exist in the vacuum of just the two of them. And there's a couple of ways that that happens throughout the show, but having it be a slightly bigger moment at the end both makes it feel more like it has an ending as opposed to just coming to a stop. But also of seeing how these two affected the community and the city and the state and law enforcement and etc.
Awesome. Well, I cannot wait to see it. So, um, Bo, what do you have on tap after this? A long nap, relaxing a little bit, or do you have any other projects lined up?
I do not have anything else lined up. I have a couple of ideas that have been rolling around in my head that I may start writing. Won't be immediately, but this has entirely been my focus basically this whole year, and it's
Sure.
been great to be singularly focused on something like that. It's been a long time since I've been able to focus that much on a play, and that is entirely to the credit of my producer of making it so that I have more time to focus on this. I have certainly been doing nothing but living and breathing this play for like the last month. Um, Big picture, I am probably leaving the country before the end of the year. So what I wind up doing next will depend a little bit on where I land. The plan right now is that I am going to be in Wales helping my dad start a company by the end of the year. So I can't commit to anything else because I won't be around, but I am hoping to land in a theater community wherever I wind up.
Well, you'll have to send us some Wrexham soccer merchandise when you get over.
Absolutely.
How about you, Seamus? Same question for you. Do you have anything lined up after this that you can talk about?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't talk about it. They'll get really mad. No, I'm just kidding. I wish it was that. I wish we were still in that coolness of it. But it has been announced. I get to come back to Bainbridge Performing Arts, and I'll be playing Clopin in Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I am very excited for. It'll be a little different than what I'm working on. I have to tell you, Greg, at the same time as this project, I was understudying for Jurassic Parking Lot. So just while we're talking about projects, you also talked about what it's like playing such a heavy character that you should know because I think I don't, did you see?
I
I don't know
did.
if you saw. Yeah,
Yeah.
just so you know what was also in my head when I was learning to play a serial killer. So that just while you brought up projects, I just want you to know what else helped me stay focused was that little humor that was
Oh,
definitely
I mean,
rattling in my head for
you talk
most of
about
it.
tonal whiplash of going
Yeah,
from the broad Jurassic parking lot fun to the tiny meanness of
Wow.
yeah, and
Gary.
then I'll get to do it again for Hunchback. So that's coming
Versatility.
up. Yeah,
Versatility, thy name is Seamus. Um,
Absolutely.
well, I can't wait for Hunchback. That is the Broadway. I love the film, but the Broadway musical is it's closer to the book. It's darker, and the music is just amazing. So
yeah,
I can't wait to see that. So, um, but right now we're talking about Ted and Gary, which runs on stage at the Julles Maes Saloon, opening Friday, October 3rd,
Yep.
and running through the 17th. Friday.
TedandGary.com. We've got a couple of trailers there, and you can find the ticket links there as well.
Awesome. And yeah, so head out there. Be sure to see this. Julles Maes doesn't have a lot of capacity, so if you're interested in seeing it, get out there and get your tickets, um, and come and see it. So, Beau Prichard, Seamus C. Smith, thanks once again for taking the time to talk with me here on Behind the Curtain with the Sound on Stage. Um, and we'll have to keep the conversation going from Wales when you're out there, Beau, and then maybe as we get closer to Hunchback, we can circle back and talk about that, Seamus.
Great. Love
Absolutely.
to.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Greg.
Thanks,
Okay.
Greg.
And for everybody watching out there, I'm Greg Highland with the Sound on Stage. Once again, thank you for tuning in and your support. And until next time, I will see you at the stage door.